Welcome to the Patel Perspective Podcast. I'm your host, Harsh Patel. I obtained a bachelor's degree in neuroscience and minors in biology and biochemistry. Through that education, this podcast allows me to deliver proper health, science, and self-improvement information to the people around the world. If you have liked any of my podcast episodes, and if you would like to show support, the only way to do so is by subscribing to my YouTube channel and by following the social media platforms of the guests you have liked. You don't really want to miss out on the highly intellectually stimulating conversations we'll be having in our future episodes. Today's guest is Noor Taraben. Noor is a registered dietitian and online nutrition coach who helps people with intuitive eating. She also educates people on intuitive eating on Instagram, so please check out Noor's Instagram page for free educational nutrition content. In this episode, we talk about how to reduce your cardiovascular risk and how to develop proper healthy strategies without fearing a particular food group. Additionally, we also talk about how to develop intuitive eating that could help you in achieving your health goals in overall. I hope you like this conversation because I think it's really important for parents and individuals to prioritize intuitive eating over calories, numbers, macros, and most importantly, how you look. And now, my conversation with Noor Taraben. Welcome back to another episode of the Patel Perspective. Today, we have a registered dietitian, and I'm glad to have you on because there's a lot of misinformation on social media. Before diving into controversial topics of social media, what interests you about being in nutrition and doing the work that you do on social media?
Of course, and thank you so much for having me. So, what interested me about being a dietitian and following my passion with nutrition is that, I grew up in a family that did have that medical expert in there, and that was my father. He was a cardiologist. So a lot of what we ate was pretty much, heart healthy. So that means, just paying attention to our cholesterol. And I saw how much of an impact food had on our health. So that really led me to pursue this. Originally, I did want to be into more of that medical field and kind of follow the same footsteps as my dad. But when I started kind of noticing that big impact that food had, I started to venture out and see a little bit more of what I can do to prevent someone from seeing a cardiologist, and getting to the point where you are having this really big, heart attacks or things that are really scary. You should definitely be seeing your, primary care and checking things out. But I looked into that field of preventative care, and I did see dietitian being one of them because of that nutrition aspect. So I tried that, and I am in a field where I just love being there and love giving all that nutrition knowledge for people so that way they don't ever have to suffer anything like strokes or heart attacks. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. I guess what drives me about nutrition, I do agree with you, but what drives me about nutrition is that just having a zero cost way. It's not totally zero cost, but it's like a really quick way that you can adhere to on day-to-day basis to improve your health. You don't have to go to a pharmacy or you don't have to get a drug to fix your issue. You can do that right now today. And how can we reduce risk of cardiovascular disease through nutrition? What are the main principles?
Absolutely. There's a lot. And, some of it, I do want to say there's a big genetics factor too that we have to be aware of. So if you do have a family history with someone who has cardiovascular disease, that's something that you should be really looking into your diet and making sure that you are checking regularly your blood lipid levels. So in terms of just making sure that you are heart healthy, you should be looking at things like looking into your sodium levels, looking into your healthy fat contents, what you're doing, making sure that your portions are acceptable. And then there's that behavioral lifestyle as well. So we don't want to technically be always sedentary. We want to try to move as much as we can, get in, find a nice activity that you enjoy. Walking is one of them. So really looking into that factorial and then into your nutrition as well.
You mentioned sodium, right? So I have a bad habit. I wouldn't say a bad habit, but I don't track my sodium because what I believe is if I have enough sodium in my diet, when I do heavy lifting or heavy cardio, it just helps me out. So I want you to like challenge that idea, and kind of, if people believe this, what are your like comments and advice on this belief that I don't need to track my sodium because I'm lifting 5 times a week. I'm doing like 3 to 4 times cardio in the week. So what is your advice for that?
I mean, it's definitely a base to base, it's by every person and what they're doing for sure. Awareness is always important. So what you're looking into, what you're bringing from outside, your grocery shopping, I do a lot of label reading, and I specifically like to look at sodium because that's one that we tend to get a lot very quickly. In terms of exercise and all that, yes, you are sweating a whole lot. But when we're doing a lot about paying attention to our body, and this is something that I like to get into, and that's intuitive eating, being intuitive and being in tuned with your body. A lot of times, if you are hitting high amounts of sodium, that might impact your blood pressure as well. So you might start to notice that your blood pressures are pretty high too. So it's good to have that awareness and making sure that, yes, I am sweating a lot, but what is my number? What am I doing just as a start base? And then see if that's, a lot as well. Is that a high amount? Mm-hmm.
And then the next thing is fat. So I know that saturated fat is bad for you, but there has to be like a percentage of fat that everyone needs to look at. Yes, fat could be bad at certain levels. So what are certain metrics that we need to focus on when we are measuring fat, or like what's the percentage of fat that we need to consume? Saturated fat, sorry.
Okay, so fat in general, we do need fat in our body. A lot of our organs are actually cushioned with fat, so you kind of do need a good layer of fat to protect yourself. It also gives that warmth that we need. So a lot of times when people start to lose a lot of weight and they're not paying attention to, their body percentages and all that, they start to get very cold. So in general, I know people think fat is not good. It's not bad, but it is a necessary part of our bodies. A lot of fat soluble vitamins like A, D, E, K, vitamin A, D, and K, they need to be absorbed with fat. So that's super important. So we still need that. Saturated fat is the one that we just need to be careful of not having the majority of our fat selections coming from saturated fat. So that percentage is typically, they say 10%, anywhere between 7 to 10% based on your cardiovascular risk as well. And then total amounts of fat is anywhere between 30 to 35% for fat. So that's the typical range that we look at. I know we might talk a little bit about tracking and all of that. Now, it really also depends. I know it's part of having more awareness of what we're eating. What's my number? What do I do? It's part of having that awareness. But one thing that I like to stress about is that people start to get obsessed about numbers, right?
Yeah.
And they start to forget about the bigger picture. And what I like to focus on in my practice is really about paying attention to healthy habits, behaviors. Are we doing obsession? Are we looking at food a certain way? Are we restricting too much? Is it impacting our mental health, right? So when we start to just look into, okay, I have, for example, 2,300 calories, let's say, whatever the goal is, or maybe 1,500 calories. And we start to think, well, I have a few calories left. It's 8 p.m. and I haven't met my calorie needs, but I'm not really hungry, things like that. And we just eat just because we need to meet that requirement. That goes beyond being intuitive as well. And it also impacts our mental health. So we have to be careful. It's not for everyone to track. And I want to say with the people, the amount of people I have been seeing, it's been showing more mental health when people are getting too obsessed. And I don't know about you if you've noticed anything like that.
Yeah, definitely. For me, it's more of like protein. So like
Mhm.
all the gym bros like to get their protein in, but I have noticed that over the months, I have stopped being so obsessed about getting like more than 150 grams of protein. I think that's really unnecessary. It also depends on the body weight. And so my general rule is if I'm full and I have just gotten in about 120 grams of protein that day, I'm fine. Like my muscles are not going to go anywhere. I would rather not overeat than like not get my like I I would prioritize intuitive eating and not binge eating for protein. So that's what in my experience, that's what I have learned.
Yep. And that honestly, that makes it more lifelong, right? When you start to trust yourself and because our body is really meant to help us thrive and survive. Our body does not want us to kind of wither away and become, lose our muscle mass. It wants us, it thrives better when we have a good muscle mass as well. So yeah.
Definitely. Oh, I was just gonna add, like I've also learned that muscle, when you after you build it, it's so hard to break it down. You have to be in a very intense catabolic state, like immense calorie restriction or calorie deficit to like really break it down, because it's tissue. It's a tissue that is highly metabolic, highly functioning tissue compared to your adipocyte. So that's what I have learned in my personal research. And so whoever was obsessing over like these numbers, like I don't think they should really focus on that. As I agree with you with that one. So
Yeah. And one day won't break it. That's kind of our theme of, whenever I'm doing my programs, it's okay if so when, people like to call it a bad day. I don't think it's a bad day. This is part of any day of eating. We're going to have ups and downs. It's how you react to it for the rest of the week is going to impact, right? So if you had quote unquote a bad day and that gets you mentally down and then that carries over to the next days, that's where it becomes something that you can't break out of. So this is where I really teach my clients that, it's okay. You can absolutely turn it around. You might have needed that, and that's okay. That's part of acceptance, part of moving on. And you might look at it as a study situation, right? Studying on, okay, what happened? Let's talk about that. Let's see, was it a stressful day? How did you manage it? Learn from it, right? So just that idea of one time isn't going to ruin it. Just it's keeping that habit going. That's what's important.
yeah, definitely. I think when we were talking about saturated fat, I guess if you have a one high day of saturated fat in the whole week, it's not going to really hurt you. Like, let's say you have 6 slices of pizza one day, and you're still maintaining that day. Like, so you're still intuitive eating, following the general principles. I don't think that's really bad. I think that's what I'm learning from what you have said. I guess what I've also learned is there's differences in terms of having animal fat and fat coming from processed foods. Now, is that true? Like, are the risks different between consuming animal fats, or fats coming from animal products than just fats coming from, let's say, processed foods like grocery store cookies, brownies, and desserts?
Hmm. Okay. Very interesting question because we do get a different type of fat when we're consuming something that's coming from an animal product. You're getting more of that cholesterol, right?
Right.
Anything that comes from an animal will give us cholesterol. Anything that comes from a plant is going to give us a different type of fat that's not really cholesterol. And some plants can give us saturated fats as well, right? So coconuts typically have higher percentage of saturated fats versus other plants. So it's really what I like to look at it is why are we choosing these items? Are we putting them into our day in a balanced way? So for example, you're having your breakfast or your whatever your meal is, and it has this nice variety in there, and then once in a while you're throwing in a cookie because you want to enjoy that cookie with your coffee.
How about every
Totally.
day?
How about every day? Okay, yeah, let's get into that. How about every day? So I mean, this is where intuitive eating gets pretty personalized for every single person, and this is why we get really personal with everyone in my program, and we talk about it. Why are we having cookies every single day? Is it more of that feel good kind of comfort food for you because you want to start off in a different way? Is it kind of a habit where you're just like on autopilot reaching, okay, this is my habit every single morning? So when we talk about cravings, where do we put that in terms of cravings? Is it an autopilot craving, right? I want you to enjoy what you're doing in terms of craving. If that cookie brings you enjoyment and you're good for the day, then that's what's going to bring you enjoyment, and I'm fine with it. But if you want to vary your enjoyment every single day, that might be fun also. And then when you get deeper and deeper into intuitive eating and deeper into realizing what foods are actually your autopilot foods or your comfort foods without you realizing, you become more comfortable with saying, you know what, I don't really need that. Like, you start to really understand the difference of what that food means to you. So it might not become an everyday food. And I think that's also empowering. And if it becomes an everyday food, then we just discuss it a little bit more, and that's okay too. If that makes sense, because it's pretty deep, intuitive eating.
Yeah, I think we're getting somewhere, because when you said what's the root problem of the cravings, I think that kind of triggered a lot of question in my mind. I guess it's like how you're grown up too. What's your family environment is? What are your comfort foods? Like, there's so many kids who grew up eating cereal, and I think social media does a very terrible job of not individualizing stuff, and it's creating like food fear, and it's creating like this a massive fear around like particular food groups. Like, what is your experience with like targeting a particular food group and saying like this caused obesity, or this caused diabetes, or this caused cardiovascular disease?
Absolutely. And it's crazy because I was putting out a reel this morning about cereals, and I haven't even hit post yet. So it's crazy that you're even talking about this. So when we start to put a fear food, and it could be cereals, and I know, like you said, it could be cereals, it could be a bigger, larger food group like carbs, where people just put it all together. And I'm like, hang on a second.
Yeah.
Let's kind of split that into what you're exactly afraid about, carbs. But in terms of, cereal or things, we have to keep in mind that some families really, first of all, they might not afford, they can't afford certain foods. So cereal is more of that quick and easy, right, option for them. They might not have time. So again, going back to the principle of balance as well, I try to teach kids and adults the idea of, well, how can I enhance this nutrition, profile of a certain food? Or if it's going to be cereal, and that's completely okay, what is that cereal giving us? So again, just coming up with awareness. It's not fear. Is it going to make you happy in the morning? Totally okay. Are we adding milk to it? Yay, that's dairy. We get some protein there. And a lot of these cereals, I know people are going to be like, oh my God, this dietitian's talking about that. But a lot of these cereals actually have a lot of vitamins in there. And there's this research that I was looking into this morning that said kids who have cereal in the morning actually have more vitamins and minerals. They actually reach their allowance better than kids who don't, because they might not be eating breakfast in the morning, right? Imagine that. Or they might not be doing well at all, and barely meeting a fruit or a veggie, but they enrich them with iron, they enrich them with vitamins in there. So we have to think in terms of balance of the whole day, and not creating this fear for this child where they become just afraid to eat anything, right? And this is what I've seen a lot with moms nowadays, and and dads and parents in general, and then they carry over this fear to their child who's now a teenager, who is struggling with knowing what to eat, because Instagram is or TikTok or whatever is kind of teaching them what to eat, and it's all these fear mongering bloggers, right? So we have to be careful. If we notice, going back into intuitive eating, if we notice that the cereal that we are choosing is making us hungry in the next hour, then it might not have a higher percentage of fiber in there. So maybe we can I have my cereal with bananas inside, there's raisins in there. So I try to bring up that profile and I notice myself being more fuller. So see how you can still have your favorite foods, no problem, but trying to look at the bigger picture of things.
Definitely. What I can say here is I started having this one brand of cereal every day for the past month, and it's like called Kashi Go cereal. It's high fiber and protein inside, and it's the best thing ever. And because it has like 9 grams of protein, and I think it has like 9 grams of fiber in 200
Wow.
calories, it's a very great option for people who kind of crave cereals from time to time. I have eaten every day for breakfast with some sort of eggs on the side, so I have my protein. And so
How do
I
you
when I huh
how do you feel about it? Does it make you happy when you do have it?
it makes my life complete. And I've made a podcast about this. I included this part in my previous podcast episodes, that how this having this cereal like just makes my breakfast complete. Like, because I'm adding low fat milk in it, and the cereal has 9 grams of protein, so that alone is like 15 grams of protein, and then eggs are another like 20 grams of protein. So I'm having like 35 to even 40 grams of protein in my breakfast. And so I feel like I don't know where this food fear is coming from. And I would really like to go deeper in this topic, with I guess we can also touch about cultural stuff. I know we are from different cultures. I'm from an Indian background, and in my culture, there is a fear around flour, and ironically, flour is used in almost every single thing in my culture, and I don't know where that fear is coming from. And whenever I go to family events, I'm not afraid of eating whatever, because I know that if I work out in the morning, or I get my 100 grams of protein in before a big family event, I'm a, I'll be fine having some sort of flour. But people who really who want to be healthy, they're afraid of flour. So have you come across any those types of fear, maybe culturally or in your experience?
Yeah, I think, and when we say flour, it's roti, right? Bread
Yeah.
and rice, and
Yeah.
it's yeah. I feel like that category, or if I know, again, people refer to it as carbs, but carbs it has so much into it. It's not just that, because carbs is technically sugar. So you can find that in milk, right? Lactose is carbs. It has
Yeah.
carbs. So, but there's this fear in I want to say, let's say, breads, grains in general. So we can say flour family, or we can say any grains. And I've seen it. I want to say I've seen it in every culture,
Like bread
honestly.
makes you fat. Like I've heard of that a lot.
It is definitely associated with it. And the crazy thing is that some articles and some, physicians and especially therapists are saying nowadays that the gluten, insensitivities might also be kind of related to mentally. When you're fearing food, you do also have you can kind of promote more of that GI dysregulation going on. So you might start to get more of a stomach ache. Imagine having something that and you're telling yourself that I don't want to have, and it's scary, and I really don't want it. So that can also cause that. So some people are actually saying our intolerances and sensitivities might be coming from mentally because of that fear factor that's been going on. But whenever I talk to my clients about adding in breads and rice, and I tell them it is part of your plate, whether it's breakfast, lunch, or dinner, it is going to be part of your plate because it gives off so much benefits for our body. And they look at me like, scared, because all they can think of is their weight gain, right? That's all they can think of. And unfortunately, again, because we come from a diet culture that's kind of been there for such a long time, especially things like we grew up with Atkins, and then there was that ketogenic diet where just carbs was just X'd, for a long time. It was just the enemy. So this is why we're coming out of it right now with so much fear, and we're trying to tell people, hey, it's okay to have rice every single day. That is okay. If that is part of your culture, embrace your culture. And whenever I do see families and my idea is I don't want you, mom, dad, whoever's coming in, I don't want you to be eating differently than your family members. I don't want you to be eating differently than what your culture is if you enjoy your culture. The idea of healthy habits is how can we make it work within what we love and enjoy. That's so important. And in terms of nutrition, I always think of two things. Is it nourishing and is it satisfying? Those are my two things. That's what helps me mentally and physically. If you're not happy with what you're eating, you will not do it for your life, right? You're not going to be doing it. So it has to give you some form of happiness, but you also have to have the awareness of how can I make it nourishing?
So when we take a look at typical American diet, what changes could we just get by eating? Obviously, we can't get by eating cereal for breakfast every day. But what small changes we can make from day to day life that could turn into big results in the future? Like in your experience, common things that you have seen that, okay, changing this thing in our in America or in other cultures, like just this one thing. Let's say I can give you an example, like choosing to drink Diet Coke or Coke Zero instead of regular Coke. Is it optimal? No, but will that allow you to like just enjoy events or enjoy your craving? Maybe. So I think that's an example. Like, what are some other examples that people can follow?
So I know some people, I just want to kind of touch on the cereal thing because I know, some people think it would be easier for them to do cereal every single day, right? And I get clients who say, even if you give me a meal plan to follow, I will follow it to the dot, right? And I tell them, I don't want you to be doing the same thing every single day. That takes away of your ability to be intuitive in that process of you to figure out what you're craving each morning and what you want to do. And I know people don't like to put in that work, but believe me, when you start to realize that inner core of what you need to figure out and solve, and you do that with the dietitian, then everything else will kind of heal itself and work out for you. So is it satisfying to be eating cereal every single day? I don't think so. You're going to get bored of it. That's for one. You might do it for the ease of it for maybe a month, and then you're like, I cannot look at a cereal box ever again because you're just done with it. So that's number one, just to make sure of, if we do cereal every single day, is it okay? Ask yourself, is it satisfying? Okay. Going back to just working on simple changes, when we look into diving into the deeper roots of your struggles, that's really going to promote that change. So one of the things that I might do, and this is based on an assessment that's done, because I want to make sure what is it that's really causing the struggle to happen with food and what's going on. And a lot of times I see, and I will say that, a lot of times I see is that people skip meals. And primarily they'll skip breakfast and lunch and then come back from work, and then dinner is, just probably not there, not made. So they're kind of looking in the pantry, going back and forth eating. So it's kind of nonstop eating throughout the night. That's the common kind of theme, what I've been seeing. So one of the biggest, most kind of, oh my God moment when I start to change things and kind of makes everything better is when we start to incorporate breakfast. That's one of the things. And if we get someone, and I know this exists and it's okay, who does not eat breakfast, it just doesn't have an appetite in the morning, we work on something that's small or, and then we might work on doing a lunch or like a mid-morning snack to complement that very small breakfast, just to get an appetite going. So when I start seeing regulation in the ways they eat their meals, then that really impacts what happens late at night. So things like intense cravings, intense binges, things like that really start to help. And that is, it's a work in progress because we have to start developing what their cravings are, what makes them satisfied in the morning, what they can put together based on, their socioeconomic status, and what they can have available. Do they have a fridge? Do they have a stove? We have to take that all into consideration because I'm looking into making this a lifestyle, not something that's hard to do and they can quit after doing it for a week or a month.
There's a lot of social media misinformation. I can give you one example. Like this ties into like socioeconomic factors and like your lifestyle your upbringing, your cravings. So I was scrolling through one day and I found that, well, I didn't know this. There are three different levels of eggs you can get from a grocery store. It's like one is cage free, one is pasture raised, the other one is regular. I'm not really sure about all the differences, but like I came across a post, right? Sorry. I just came across a post saying like, okay, you should only buy pasture raised, I think. I'm not sure, but you should only buy the top tier ones. And when you look at the price of it, they're like super expensive for a 12 pack. Now, many people in the United States don't have the income. I, being a college student, I still looking for jobs, like transitioning from undergrad to grad school. You're living paycheck to paycheck. You don't have money. Many people out there are parents paying for their kids, food, schools. How does all of this go into your lifestyle and your diet and nutrition?
That is such an important question, because this is why it's important to ask these questions in the assessment, so you make sure that it's a personalized approach. Absolutely. And so again, when we're looking at the nutrition profile of eggs, yes, they did find some nutrients that might be a little bit higher. Is it to the point where it says this is much better and the other one should go in the trash? No, it isn't. Can we still enhance that meal even if we're buying? I mean, I've seen the prices of eggs and it's ridiculous. And if I were to come here and, if I, again, was a college student and I looked at the price and I was reading an article that said only pasture raised eggs, I would probably say, well, let's skip eggs then, right? Let's just skip eggs because we need to afford so-and-so and I have a, certain budget. So this is where fear mongering, gets in the way of the bigger picture, right? And this is not the case. When I recommend eggs, I recommend any eggs. Yes, again, there is some study to show that the pasture raised might have minute nutrition a little bit more, but can we add nutrition onto that plate? Can we add tomatoes onto the plate? Can we add, certain things there? We can absolutely do that to add a little bit more vitamins there. Yes, right? So we have to be careful about that. I also recommend people get canned foods. Again, another fear foods for a lot of people, right? Because it's canned, it might not be the best, and we should be doing produce. Well, a lot of people actually throw away a lot of food because they're getting fresh and they're not using it, and this is more expensive. I recommend doing frozen. I recommend doing canned because of that flexibility of always having the availability, because I'm looking for the bigger picture. I want you to make sure to get that nutrition profile. And, there's a study that also came out about the freshness of produce and what the vitamin content of it, the nutrition content of it versus canned versus frozen. If you don't eat that produce right away, the content of that nutrition starts to get lower and lower each and every day versus frozen and canned. It's frozen. It's at that peak nutrient profile and value. So is there any differences? No. But again, if we're going to be having that awareness, I would just recommend looking into the food label, just looking at that sodium content, because sometimes canned foods do add a lot of sodium in there. So just look for the no added salt, or balance out your intake of what you're doing, right? And make sure that you are doing it, and have that overall picture. So fear is really moving us away from having a good, nourishing plate, because people are starting to not choose anything. And they're getting to the point where they come to me and they're like, Noor, I don't know what to eat anymore. Everything's off limits.
Yeah, that's the biggest concern right now. What are some principles of picking out nourished food, like nutritious foods? So when we look at a nutrition label, or whenever someone looks at a nutrition label, like obviously there's might be some rules that we should follow. Okay, cereal is not the most optimal, but I guess we can compare between brands or compare between types of cereals to maybe pick out a healthier option. And let's say fruits, right? Maybe mango, like let's say we compare two fruits like mango and banana. I'm not sure, but like mango is very sugary. Like, do I need mango right now? Am I going to use that sugar up in the next hour? Or can I choose like a banana, which gives me like potassium, so I can use that for my workout? Like, what are some rules that we should look for when we're trying to make healthy options?
Variety.
Variety.
Variety, right? So this is what I tend to see. I say bananas are awesome. People start eating bananas every single day. They take the rule and they're like, that's a rule that we have to do. No, they're great, but we have to have variety. Mangoes are awesome, right? Do we need to eat mangoes every single day? Well, if you haven't, you're trying to finish a batch, maybe, but it doesn't mean that you should kind of, mangoes are, this is what happens with trends, right? Cauliflower was trendy not too long ago, and people made cauliflower into everything they can think of. And I started seeing it in smoothies, and I'm like, why are they in smoothies, right? They did it in pizzas. And don't take the rule and make it, don't take one food and make it the rule for your life, because that you're getting into boredom. You're going to feel like I can never see this fruit again. So when we think about what we're about to choose, first of all, I don't care if whatever fruit it is, I don't care whatever vegetable. What I care about is maybe looking into colors. That's what I care about. And when I would say colors, I'm looking into throughout the week, right? Because I don't want you to get obsessed. Today I didn't have a rainbow looking plate, or, I want you to think when I'm grocery shopping and I'm looking down on my cart, right now, do I have a mix of, blues, purples, reds, greens, within the range of, again, my budget, which I can add in frozen veggies and canned foods. That's totally fine. That's what I want you to do. When we're reading the food label, what I like to focus on are actually, it's not the calories, because people think it's the calories. I actually don't care about the calories. What I care about is what that food is going to give me in terms of nutrients, right? Yeah. Because it could be and people say empty calories and all of that, because if you're going to choose between what two foods you're going to get and you're looking just at the calories and not reading, oh, is it giving me fiber and protein and whatever, then people are just going to choose the lower calorie option, not caring about what it's going to give me to complement my plate, right? So when we're looking at the food label, I ask people to look at fiber. How much fiber is this giving me? And I like to focus on 3 grams or more. If it's, bread or rice or pasta, just look at 3 grams or more per serving. If we're looking at sodium, also comparing sodiums, try to look for the lower sodium amount. Try not to exceed, if it's a meal, try not to exceed 500. But again, this is based on the overall picture of, what your health looks like and all of that. So that's individualized. And then, so fiber, sodium is what I like to focus on. And of course, protein, because that's one of the components of allowing for fullness, allowing for that muscle, all of that. So trying to just complement things together. And just like you said with the cereal and how you complemented that and you made sure that it had a good fiber in there. And that's where I might add in fruits, right? Yeah. If sometimes another thing that I do look at with the food label is the added sugar. Okay. So the added sugar, again, is another one. And I've done this, and you can definitely do this as an intuitive eating and trying to figure out your amount of sugar, is I try to choose the lower amount of added sugar, and I add fruit to it, because fruit is more natural and it has that sugar, and it also promotes more fiber. So you kind of get a win-win balance going on there, and you're still satisfied. So that way it helps. If you chose, whatever cereal that's you like once in a while, that's completely fine. I don't care if it's Cinnamon Toast Crunch or whatever it is, complement it. And you did the same thing. Your protein is probably higher than anybody else. It's individualized by adding the eggs, things like that. Make it work, because when we look at cereal, what is cereal on our plate? It's considered a grain. What did I say about having grains? You can have grains every single meal, technically. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So that's going to go in the place of grains. So you have the opportunity to, complement the rest of the plate with protein, fruit, all of that.
Yeah, I guess this is a point that I wanted to make like 2 minutes back. Keto pizza is the most disgusting pizza I've ever had. Like, it's so bad. Like, I would just rather eat the real thing, or maybe find a way to make it high protein. But like, keto pizza is just, with cauliflower, it's so hard to make. I don't know if you made it. I've made it one day. It requires so much effort, so much work that you can mess your whole kitchen up, because you actually have to boil the cauliflower. You have to kind of break those cauliflower into chunks, make it like a little, I don't know, mashy. Put like form like a crust, bake it, and then wait for it to, like, I don't know, solidify, and then put your toppings on. It's so much work. So,
and it's not the real thing.
it's not the real thing. You're not gonna be satisfied anyways.
There you go.
You might have a lot of fiber, but like you're not even gonna eat the whole thing if you don't like it. So that goes to trash.
Yeah.
So I guess I wanted to note that. And the second thing is, like, I wanted to really highlight a calorie is not a calorie, because whenever someone believes a calorie is a calorie, then they automatically think that donuts are better than bananas, or like a beef jerky is better than real beef. Not the most optimal case, right? But like, it's calories, not a calorie. And sometimes people get so caught up on calories, they obviously miss the bigger picture, like you said earlier.
Absolutely. And I wanted to touch about the cauliflower pizza, because that's one of the things also when we talk about satisfaction and choosing cravings, because some people will be like, okay, Nora, I know you said I'm allowed to have, cookies, or I'm allowed to have ice cream, and within that balance and understanding that my cravings are okay. So they will go ahead and go to the grocery store and kind of look for a cookie that's made out of, I don't know, they think maybe, let's just say they don't have a gluten insensitivity, but they think gluten is something that we should avoid. And then they say, okay, low sugar, or the ice cream is low fat or whatever. And I tell them, listen, this is a craving. What I would rather you do is enjoy it mindfully to the most, that first spoonful of ice cream that's just perfect. It's so good. It's not fake. It's not, some people like the low fat one. That's fine. As long as you like it. Don't do it in the name of diets. Do not do it. Because what I see a lot of is that then people will just have more of that low fat ice cream, and then they're just like, I couldn't meet it, I'm not there, I'm not satisfied. And then guess what happens? The next day they're going to Baskin Robbins or whatever, Cold Stone, and they're eating an ice cream. So why not satisfy it from the first start and learn how to be mindful about it, and kind of understand what are cravings? And that's something that I teach all the time.
That's an excellent point. I guess I didn't think about it. Like, you can overeat on healthier foods. You can overeat on healthier ice cream. Like, it's like when I eat some Ben and Jerry's at home, I feel so much satisfied, but I know in my heart and in my mind that I cannot finish the whole pint. There's no chance I'm going to finish it looking at the nutrition label. But maybe if I have like maybe 5, 6, 7, even 10 spoons, I'll be satisfied. Maybe that's just 200 calories, 300 calories. That's fine. But like, it's that you cannot compromise on very, very delicious foods. And also that goes into your comfort. Me with ice cream, like, I have had dessert every single day, and those desserts are not even healthy. I think that's what keeps me going, honestly. And I'm also running this experiment lately of just not counting calories. And I'm feeling so less stressed about everything. I tend to prioritize fiber and protein, not at every meals, but like 2 out of the 3 meals I eat. And just like taking a break from calorie counting, because I think when stress plays into a role for calorie counting, you're just messing your dieting up or eating pattern up. And I think that's also a critical thing to highlight here. So.
Yep, stress does have an impact on our hormones also. So we start to crave a little bit more food. We start to feel more hungrier for some people. It impacts, so relying on, again, numbers in terms of calories or even the scale, it can impact our behavior and decision, right? So this is why it's important. And I just love the idea of being intuitive and being trusting around food and having a healthier relationship with all foods, where nothing is off limits unless obviously, it's an allergic reaction food or whatever it is, then you have to be careful. But in terms of just health, everything you're allowed to eat, but you start to realize intuitively that some foods feel better physically and some foods feel better mentally, right? So that it's the balance of having that relationship and knowing that, well, I have a lot to do in life. I have my work, I have my career, I have, all of this. And if I don't eat a certain way, then that's going to impact my life as well. So this is where it's just a full circle with intuitive eating. You start to develop this deeper connection with food, and it's a fuel. It gives you that happiness, satisfaction, and you're able to make a lot more decisions instead of just being on a phone and tracking and looking and obsessing and having that ruin your day, and then that impacts what you do. And you know what I mean? It's like a stressful environment. And this is why we're moving away from dieting in general and just more embracing the balance and awareness, because people still need to learn about how to put things together, about nutrition in general. Not a lot of people have that nutrition knowledge. So it's important to have that and then use our body to trust, because that's what our body is meant to do. It wants us to thrive and survive.
Definitely. When we talked about differences in perception of healthy food, not in perception, but like mental energy and physical energy, like why do you think very highly processed foods drain our energy? Is it because of the insulin spike? Because I'm trying to figure that out lately. Like, what is in ultra processed foods that is really terrible for energy compared to healthier foods?
So when we talk about processed food in general, there's this misconception about processed foods. The term processed foods means anything that's been handled in a factory, right? So if you take a banana, some of the bananas come in a bag, right? So that's actually processed in a factory, right? Some foods, so it's that knowledge, and that, you have to have also a food label, so that knowledge to understand what the food is. So I think there's also, that impact of, do we know how to use these processed foods, which I don't think is bad. They're not bad. They're food. But do we know how to combine them into our diet? Because a lot of people, when they just look at processed foods and they're buying processed foods, they don't necessarily put together a balanced way of eating. Something might just be one way or the other, or they might just be high in sodium. They might not have a high fiber profile. They might not be choosing things like that, right? So I don't necessarily think that the food itself, the processed food, is causing low energy. I think it's the combination of how people are eating it. That's what's causing it. So if you start to realize, okay, well, wow, this cracker that I'm buying has a high fiber profile, and I can combine, cottage cheese on top of it, or combine some turkey and cheese. Look at that. I just made a very nice snack, and my energy is going to be way better than if I just take that cookie, that cracker, and label Cheese Whiz on it, for example. Is there a profile there that gives us that fullness? Nope. You're going to be hungry in the next, 30 minutes, 1 hour. You're going to be raving your fridge again, right? So that's what I think personally, because again, I'm moving away from that fear mongering and trying to, let's work with it and see what we can do to improve overall what we're eating in a day.
I guess this also plays in the role of having desserts that are really high in calories. Because the only instance I can think of that could mess you up is, well, there are other instances, but like Krispy Kreme donuts are really delicious. And even if you eat, like, you need to have that understanding that, let's say, for example, if you eat like 4 donuts, even 3 donuts, you're going to be mentally satisfied, but that satisfaction will just last for like 5 minutes. But then in reality, you have consumed like 50%, like not like 30% of your caloric intake, like in that one sitting. And what you have achieved is just probably 100 grams of sugar in that sitting, and with 0 protein, 0 fiber. I think there's also that to it, like the inability to understand if this one type of food will kind of nourish me, like you said, compared to satisfy you. There's has to be like a healthy balance was what I'm trying to learn. So now, like back in the day, yes, I would go for a third donut, but like now I do all the time. Like either I have a half a donut or like a whole donut, but I don't have like more than one donut. And so understanding really balancing nourishment and satisfaction really helps. I can see how it really helps people out. So
Keep in mind, there's a behavior associated to eating those types of food,
mm,
right? So sometimes, and I see this a lot, the behavior is that I'm going to go have donuts, and you know what? Because I'm going to have donuts and I want to enjoy donuts, I'm going to skip dinner. That's the behavior that tends to
yeah.
happen,
Mm,
right? And I think one of the things that we don't realize is, when you said that right now, all I can do is half or one donut, probably you're not skipping a meal. Probably you're eating more balanced throughout the day. So you don't have that urge that is natural in your body. And this is part of intuitive eating. When you are underfeeding your body nourishment, you are going to be hungry. You're going to be ravaging, right? You're going to be super hungry. So one of the things, and this is a natural phenomenon that happens in our body, is that when we are in that extreme state of hunger because we're underfed, our body is going to naturally crave those types of foods. And these are the foods that are high in sugar because naturally when we look at, biochemistry, carbohydrates are the quickest form of energy to be dissolved in our body. It just releases and you're good to go. This is what we give to diabetic patients who have a low blood sugar all of a sudden and they're fainting. What do you give them? You don't give them a salad. You don't give them, here, eat some lettuce. You don't do that, right? You give them quick sugar to get their blood sugars back. So this is so important to realize that there's a certain behavior to why we may be overeating a certain food. And this is a natural phenomenon. Again, it's not our body kind of being mean to us. There's a hidden message. Hey, we need to understand that you are not feeding me that well. And I really need to get some energy because you have a busy lifestyle. Like you're up and about, and I need to support that. And I have no other way instead of triggering that hormone release for you to go ahead and eat and eat and eat. Yes, it's going to make you feel awful, but there's that misunderstanding that it's a combination of mental and physical satisfaction in order, this is something that's lacking in an average person to understand that nutrition plays a role for us to make sure that we're not having that crash after we eat something that's high in sugar, right? So I want you to remember there's a behavior associated to our actions. And this is part of the nutrition healing, what I do. It's not just, I want you to eat this. I want you to understand the science behind your hormones and all of that.
definitely. I guess there's also, you can say there's a homeostatic regulation thing going on. Whatever's going on internally can come out as your behaviors, like you said. How I can associate this is with like lack of sleep, right? Like one night of sleep deprivation makes you feel low energy. Everything is off the next day, so that you tend to go to bed earlier and get enough sleep. I think we can associate that with this. Like when you eat, let's say 4 or 5 donuts or like a hollow meal that has no really nourishment in it, your body gives you kind of signals. It particularly happens to me sometimes too when I have like a meal like that. I crave protein, I crave fiber. It's not my mental craving, but like there's something about the body that kind of forces you to have a meal that's really balanced. So
Absolutely. All the time. I am someone who has my blood pressure is pretty low and it gets very low quickly. So I can feel the taste of sodium on my lips whenever I'm like, I need sodium. And it kind of happens naturally. And this is part of the beautiful thing of intuitive eating. When you start to trust that, you're like, okay. And your body, like you said, it adjusts every single time. So it realizes, and you just have to pick up on those signals. And that's part of also picking up on your hunger and your fullness signals, which is something that's really important when you start to get into intuitive eating.
I guess for the last few minutes, we can talk about intuitive eating briefly. What is intuitive eating and how do we develop it with every meal?
So simply intuitive eating is from that word intuitive, to be in tuned with your body, to be kind of in that relationship that's trusting of your body's signals and to follow, have it lead us, right? In order for us to do that, we really have to move away from dieting and listening to external sources. Internally is what we need to use to guide us. So externally, these are things like, doing excessively calorie counting or following this rigid, strict diet that's not what our body it naturally wants, or eating against, so if someone says intermittent fasting, don't eat at this time, but naturally we're hungry, that's kind of moving away from what our body is trying to tell us. And this actually creates this imbalance. And this is where you see people doing, binge eating or feeling frustrated, ditching it. So a lot of people who start intuitive eating basically reach diet bottom. They're just like done with the whole dieting world. They've been yo-yo dieting for as long as they remember, gaining weight, losing weight, all of that. And that really impacts, your metabolism. It impacts your health when we're always constantly shifting from losing weight because we're following something so strict, into letting go, and then we're kind of binging and going back and we're climbing back into our weight. So that is the idea of, intuitive eating is really moving away from all of that and getting in touch with our regulation of what our body needs, improving sleep, improving stress, looking into those factors and what, how they've been impacting our metabolism in our bodies. So there's a lot that goes in there. It's realizing, mindful eating, being aware of how you're eating, your behavior with food, if you're fearing foods, skipping foods, so things like that. It's just a whole process of understanding, and you start to just heal that relationship because of what dieting has been doing, and it's been damaging for such a long time.
So, would you say when we talk about meals, would you say leaving out or not completing your plate is completely fine?
So once you go into the process of intuitive eating, the first step is really about resetting your metabolism and making sure that you're able to listen to your hunger cues very well. Because when we are years and years into dieting, we start to kind of not hear our fullness and not hear our hunger, try to kind of, I'm not really hungry, that's not hunger, I'm going to ignore it because I'm afraid to gain weight or whatever, right? So we have to make sure that, first of all, I have my clients start off by making sure they're eating well, they're focusing on that nutrition profile, they're building up awareness before I move them into trusting that hunger and fullness signal, because they need to build it back up. We're all born with the natural ability to hear our hunger and fullness. So if you think about a baby, as soon as they're hungry, they cry, they open their mouths to eat, right? As soon as they're full, what do? They're pretty good at being intuitive. They do not put anything else. If you're trying to feed a baby a bottle, I don't know if you've ever done that, and they're full, you cannot force that baby one more drop into it. That's it. So they're pretty good at that. But unfortunately, as we get older, we start to hear those external things from outside where it says, nope, you can't leave that table until you finish your plate, even if you're full, I don't care, things like that. And then dieting comes in and it becomes so confusing and all that. So we start to feel like we can't trust that hunger, right? Well, mom is saying I have to finish my plate, but I'm so full. Or mom is saying that I have to eat, but I can, or I have to, things like that. So it becomes so confusing. So once we establish more of that awareness and understanding of nutrition, and we start to, the celebration is when you start to hear your fullness and hunger again, and you start to stop eating. And I have clients take pictures, or like, you know what? I couldn't finish my plate because I felt really satisfied. And I don't encourage anyone to throw away any foods. Wrap it up. You're going to have more foods. That's pretty good. Put it in the fridge away. And then some people finish their plate and they're like, you know what? Today I was hungry and I'm going to trust that because my body, as you know, when we're looking into calories, our body isn't going to have the same exact calorie number every single day. There's going to be fluctuations based on internally what's going on. Are we sick? Are we feeling okay? Are we moving a lot? So it's not an exact number. So you might finish your plate one day, you might not finish your plate the other days. And that's the power and beauty of being intuitive and understanding of, where satisfaction is and where comfortable fullness means. I don't, and I talk about comfortable fullness a lot, because being uncomfortable is when you're like, okay, I need to unbutton, I need to lie down. That's not where we need to be at, right? If I tell you, let's go for, just a walk, let's kind of just see something, let's do an activity, not running. I don't want you to running after dinner, but just something light. Can you move? Okay, that's a comfortable level of fullness. So they start to pick up on that. And because of that, their weight starts to go into a healthier weight for their body. And this is determined based on intuitive ability, right? And this is another topic, because people get into, well, what's healthy for my body? That's that trust. If we move away from numbers and we stop focusing on that, all we focus on is our behaviors, then our body will naturally go to a weight where it thinks it's best is, for functionality. That's what's important.
That's a deep topic. That's like going into metabolism, body weight, set point, biochemistry. So that could be a long discussion. What are you currently doing online coaching wise?
Yeah, so this is my area. So really healing our relationship with food, moving away from dieting. Currently, I do a 12-week program where I have clients come in. We do it in a group setting. There is that one-on-one as well in there. So I am looking into their food journals. They put it down into an app. I'm reviewing it. I always encourage pictures. There's no calorie counting on it. I want them to be able to look at a plate and kind of have that awareness. And I also look into their mood as they're eating. Are they stressed out? What's going on? So they communicate with me. And this is how I provide feedback, and we start to understand that role of behavior and nutrition. And we also meet twice a month into that group setting. So it's like a big therapy kind of. You go in and like you said, a lot of our decisions come from culture, from our family, from things that have been rooted in us, of what we've been told. So I will say a lot of times tears are shed, because it's a very personal journey about how we view our bodies, how we've struggled with this idea of how we should look like, how people commented on ourselves, how we were brought up. All of these things, we look into it deeper, and they come out from this program just feeling that food freedom, being able to understand all of this, and just really having that self-acceptance about themselves, and looking into, I need to be healthy for my functional life, as opposed to meeting a certain appearance because of the trend nowadays, right? So it's a lot that we cover in those 12 weeks together.
That's awesome. I'll provide the links in the description, YouTube and Apple Podcasts for now. And what is your last piece of advice for parents who are raising kids in this social media toxic world, growing up? So what's your advice for those people?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I have 2 kids of my own, and I've been practicing on them intuitive eating ever since they're little. And the message and the way they talk about food in their bodies is just rewarding to see them, how free they are from dieting and all of that, and that, stress of life that we grew up with. So what I would like to say to parents is that, first of all, I want you to look at your own relationship with food, and I want you to see where your own struggles, because a lot of times I see that parents kind of put that out into their kids, whether they are, quote, not eating the healthiest, or their body looks a certain way, and they start to put that frustration because they never were able to heal it and kind of take care of it themselves. So really be careful of the way you communicate your frustration, or the way you talk to your child about their body, about their habits, the way they're eating, because the way you're doing it can impact their behavior, and how they treat food. So a lot of times I see kids come to me who hide away, kind of eat in their rooms because they don't want their moms to look at what they're eating or their parents, or they feel ashamed of their own body. So all of these comments, please be careful about what you're doing and talking about with your child. Try to have a neutral tone, focus on functionality, focus on healing your own struggles. And I also see adults and kids. And we work, the same thing that I teach my adults, I teach the same to kids as well. We never think, even if I do have a kid who is, parents come to me and say, well, they need to lose weight. I tell them to be careful with that tone because, losing weight isn't the message that we're looking at. We're looking at making sure that his body is functional and healthy and appreciated and celebrated and all of that. So really pay attention to the language. Do not put your child on a restrictive diet or any diet in general. Look into natural behaviors, natural healthy habits, because a lot of research has been showing that when you start your child young on a diet, the mental, the stress, everything, the impact to it isn't beneficial. It's a lifelong, really unhealthy relationship with food. And more of that, we've been seeing a lot of eating disorders and disordered eating associated with kids who start so young on a diet. So just make sure that you are very careful with your child when discussing weight and healthy habits and all that.
It's an awesome advice. I hope parents, individuals do take this diet on in their heart, because I think it's really critical for understanding what nutrition is and what ordered eating is and intuitive eating is, because I think there's a lot of misinformation again, but there's a lot of lack of knowledge because we don't have enough time. People don't have enough time to look into science behind their behaviors and science behind their food. So I appreciate your time today with whatever you have shared, from nutrition for cardiovascular disease, how to handle BS from social media, and we've talked about a lot about intuitive eating. So thank you so much for coming on to the show.
Thank you so much again for having me. It was fun.
Great. Okay. Thank you, everyone. See ya.